Welcome back to the Goal Line Stand, your home for the latest in NFL news and happenings. Andrew Spaziano, Tom Condi here to talk about some of the things that have happened the last couple weeks. Some free agent signings, a big trade from the Patriots to the Rams involving Brandin Cooks, and some other assorted news. Tom, how you doing?
Good. Free agency, the second wave was finished. I was happy to see Cowboys make a couple moves. Nothing flashy, but I'll take Hearns. The rule changes, that got situated, which was good. Des caught it, as we all knew originally anyways. Just the past few weeks there's been quite a few moves, and it definitely shapes the draft into something different than we were expecting at the beginning of the free agency period in the new year of the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive into it. The latest news that happened was yesterday, not late last night, but last night. Brandin Cooks got traded from the Patriots to the Rams. The Patriots get a first-round pick this year from the Rams and also a sixth-round pick from the Rams.
Yeah, I was in the middle of dinner. I was watching the Yankees play, and all of a sudden my phone goes off, and I was like, holy smoke, this ain't real, is it? And further investigation, it was real. And I am a bit surprised because Brandin Cooks is a really good talent, and he's just being traded every year now. I mean, you're guaranteed a first-round pick, but I just don't understand trading a talent like this. I know in New Orleans he's had some rumbles of he wanted the ball more, and New England, I guess he wasn't a fit, even though he was their leading receiver in targets, yards, I want to say receptions as well.
I think Gronk might have had more receptions, but to your point, he was an integral part to their offense.
Yeah.
I also just want to add that on Facebook last night, you used the phrase tossed around like a garden salad, which I thought was a clever analogy, but it's true, though. I mean, the guy, if you think about it, he's a top, probably, I'd conservatively say a top 20 talent at receiver.
Yeah, and he's still a baby, and I mean that in a good way. I mean, he's only 24, maybe 25.
Yeah.
But 25 is pushing it because I really think he's 24. I think he's one of the young talents that came out when they were young, like Tyrone Smith, who came when he was 20 years old.
Yeah, you're right about that. He's still got a lot of, age-wise, he's still got a lot left in the tank, but I was surprised because a lot of the stuff floating around was that Gronk was potentially on a trade block. You'd actually were teasing me about it yesterday, about the Patriots potentially trading Gronk. So the Cooks thing kind of came out of left field. It was a shock just in the regard that there were no rumors about that, which seems to be, especially with the Patriots, kind of how trades come about because they're so tight-lipped, or as tight-lipped as you can be in 2018 with social media and such. But I was definitely surprised, and as a fan, I'll be honest, I wasn't really big on the Cooks trade to begin with last year. I mean, I don't think he's a bad talent, but I don't think he's being paid like a number one receiver talent, which is what he's going to want to be paid as next offseason.
I'm going to dive into that, the X and O's, but there was a report when I was investigating as soon as it popped up on my phone, was that apparently, which I didn't hear about, but I guess New England was trying to sign him long term, but they couldn't agree upon a price. And I think that had to be because this past offseason with all these receivers getting 15, 16, 17 million a year, he's looking at it like, well, then I should be getting 15, 16, 17 million a year as well. But down to the X's and O's, Gronk is all that and then some when he's on the field, but you can kind of hang your hat on that he's going to miss 4 games. But the thing that Brandin Cooks was so successful with is blowing over the top of the defense, running that streak route and letting those shorter receivers like Amendola work the inside patterns and opening up the middle and the short passing game. Because if you have a threat like Brandin Cooks out there, even though Brady and Cooks wasn't on the same page sometimes for the most part with their connection on the deep ball.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
But he at least threatened that deep bomb, that 60-yard catch and run for a touchdown, where right now, who does New England have that's going to blow over the top?
But I think the thing with New England is I don't think they've done very well and they have won championships without that threat on their team. And I think it's nice to have a guy like that can stretch the field, but it's also the fact that Tom Brady, even during the peak of his career, the prime of his career, has never been a very good deep ball thrower.
But that's not what I'm not saying that's what you want Brady to do, but you want that threat.
But what I'm saying is that if he's not good at making that throw, then how real is the threat? I want to know what the percentage was of times they hit him. I get what you're saying, that you have to respect that. But at the same time, just the way their offense is run, I don't necessarily think you need that. And it just seems strange to me that they gave away a first-round pick for a guy whose main skill is to run that route.
If you want Edelman, Amendola, and Gronk to eat up the short and intermediate routes, you have to bring that corner out on a streak and have the respect from the safety to at least go to the deepest part of the field. As a safety, your main job in pass coverage is to not let anybody go behind you. So if you have a receiver like Brandin Cooks who runs a 4.4 and he's just running a streak, you're bringing that safety at least 30 yards downfield from the line of scrimmage, which will allow Gronkowski to run your inside patterns at the 15, 20-yard mark, and you have your Amendola and your Edelmans and your shorter receivers running those rub patterns underneath, which allows Brady to check down also to his running backs as well.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It's a good point you're making, that just the idea of him is a benefit to the offense. I guess my thing is that I respect the fact that Brandin Cooks is an elite talent and you have to respect it, but my problem is when you get to the dollar part of it, where you're going to have to pay that guy $15 million a year, and he doesn't have a great route tree. That was my thing with him. That was my criticism of him when he came from New Orleans to New England. I was like, what can this guy do? If he wants to get paid like a number one, he has to run more than just streaks and comebacks, which is really kind of like that Jacksonville game in the AFC Championship. He had like 99 yards receiving. It was all comebacks.
All right. He just saw Sammy Watkins get paid $16 million a year.
Oh, I don't blame him for wanting the money.
Yeah.
But believe me, like I get it. I understand his perspective, but I'm thinking from New England's perspective, I understand why you don't want to pay that guy that money. But what I question is, why'd you trade for him in the first place if you knew you were going to have to dish out that money?
Yeah, maybe they thought they were going to have more production, or they were going to get a discount for being a winning culture.
Yeah.
I say that as a question only because I understand what you're saying, and as a franchise aspect, if you're going to spend money on an elite receiver like that, you're going to want them for the long term, and you see teams who will spend that much on a receiver, but then 2, 3, 4 years down the road, they're like, oh, trade cut. So I think they just cut bait now, got their first back that they spent in the first place, and just called it a day.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the part that where it kind of ends up being a net positive zero for me is that, like, yeah, they got a first-round pick back for him. It's not like they got, like, a third and a fifth or something where I would really be critical, because they traded away a first-round pick last year, and, I mean, it's very well known how thin their draft class was last year. So that's a pick you really could have used, whether to pick there or to trade down in last year's draft. But now they have 2 firsts this year, so I think the impact of the trade is going to depend on who they use these picks on and how they pan out as players, because you'll be able to say it's a good trade if they get good talent out of these picks. Or if they end up being duds, you can kind of question the entire logic behind trading for him in the first place. If you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah, I understand. I do like how New England has 5 picks in the first 2 days. I'm a big fan of grabbing as many picks in the first 2 days as possible. And who knows, you guys, New England could be grabbing a receiver top tier talent in the receiving class this year. You got Ridley, Kirk.
Yeah,
more.
They have a lot of holes to fill, especially in defense, but, left tackle and offense, they could use receiver depth now. So, yeah, it's never a bad thing to have that much draft capital in the first 2 days, like you're saying.
I will say it makes it interesting having that, because now you get people going, oh, well, they have 2 first-round picks, and you know who is worth 2 first picks? Odell Beckham Jr. Or we can throw the fire out there that maybe they're gonna make a play on Earl Thomas.
The in the back of my mind, I was like, they have 2 first-round picks. What if they're trying to trade up for a quarterback?
Oof. Yeah, that's another thing. But I honestly, here's the thing. I don't see OBJ getting traded.
No.
So I don't see it. I don't see a team giving up, even though he's uber talented and he's in my top 5 receivers right now. I don't see a team giving up that much capital. And New England, like you just said, New England has a few holes where if they can plug in, like I just said, 5 picks in the first 2 days, they can be the lead dog right now. Because right now on paper, I wouldn't say they're the lead dog in the AFC.
No, I mean they're still in the top 3.
Yes, yeah. Don't get it twisted. Like I still predict them to make the playoffs because they have Tom Brady at the helm and Bill Belichick as their coach. But right now on paper, they're not as sexy as other teams like a Pittsburgh or a Jacksonville.
No, 100%.
So if they use these picks wisely, they can get talent to fill in holes. Plus, what's the Bill Belichick way? If he can trade a pick, if he can flip a pick for a talent that he knows, like an OBJ, I don't see him being traded, but I can see it happen because Belichick likes to trade, if he does trade, for talent that he knows.
Yeah.
And someone like Earl Thomas, he knows, and he can give up capital and still have 3 picks in the first 2 days.
So you mentioned Odell Beckham, and I think what's interesting how this kind of links the 2 stories together, him and Cooks, is that the Rams balked at Beckham. They said that's way too much to give up, so they started talking to New England about Cooks, and they were able to pay a price, still a hefty price. A first-round pick is a lot to give up for somebody, but the Giants' asking price they felt was too much to handle, and maybe they think they can get Cooks for a little less money than Beckham's going to command. I mean, obviously Beckham's a better receiver, but at the same time, you look at the Rams roster, they don't necessarily need an Odell Beckham. I mean, Brandin Cooks, I think, fits in well with what they have with Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, and, Gurley and Goff and whatnot.
Yeah, this Rams offense is going to be unique with all the talent that they got, and they're still going to be a run-first team. I don't see them changing. They have Goff, who's still learning. I know this is his 3rd year now, but he's still learning the NFL style, the NFL game. And I think they're going to lean on Gurley, but at least now you have Cooks who, just like with New England, will spread it over the top, which they would have missed with Watkins, even though he didn't have as a productive season as some would hope. Sammy Watkins would at least still threaten that deep ball, and you got to protect that on defense.
Yeah, definitely. And I also do agree with you. I don't think Beckham's going to get traded. I mean, I think the whole thing with the Giants, to touch on it, because we haven't, I mean, the whole thing's interesting. They had a whole back and forth where John Mara was like, we're not going to trade this guy. Then all Schefter kept doing is leaking what they were looking for in Odell Beckham. I mean, I think it's no secret that he's on the block potentially. And I mean, I like him as a talent, but I also understand that the culmination of things he's done on and off the field is kind of a red flag for people. And I can understand the Giants, to a degree, who are trying to rebuild their culture with a new coach and a new GM, would want to distance themselves from a guy like that who's a bit of a headache.
See, this OBJ, I really have a tough time because I can see Odell being traded for a boatload of picks. It would have to be boatload.
Definitely.
But I just don't think to be successful this year, to play for a Super Bowl, because that's what every team plays for, trade in OBJ, that'd be 2 steps back.
I also feel like the Giants at some point are going to have to decide whether or not he's in their long-term plans, because if he's not, then they're going to dump him for significantly. They're going to end up, what's going to happen is that they feel like they're in control right now because it's April, and there's a lot of time between now and the season starting in September. So if they're really looking to trade him, they're kind of going to sit for a little bit because they feel like teams will get more jumpy. The problem is, at some point, if you don't want this guy, then you have to get rid of him. You need to get something back for him. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I think they're setting themselves up to do something stupid and get nothing for him.
I see what you're saying, but your perspective is New York wants to get rid of him. I don't think they do. I really don't. I believe this is just a culture, as in everyone's going to earn their spot, and no one, not even Odell Beckham Jr., who you know is their best player, offense, defense, special team, is their best player. So they're going to cause a little bit of tension in that locker room going, we have to earn our spot. Even it doesn't matter if your name is Eli, if your name is Odell, it does. You're gonna earn your spot. So I think, me personally, this is kind of a tug of war of you're gonna listen to me,
and you're setting a tone.
Yes.
Yes. No, I like that that angle to it. I just think, the football guy, the hypothetical guy, just kind of wonders like what's happening. I'm just trying to kind of approach this from all sides. But to your point, I've never really looked at it from that perspective, and that's an interesting. That's a good way of trying to set the culture, though.
Now I'm gonna go to the draft. A lot of Giants fans, a lot of Giant faithful want Barkley. That can work, but you have to have Odell Beckham on your team. Because if not, when you look at that team, if they drafted Barkley, you'd have Barkley in the backfield with Eli and a reformatted offensive line. They spent some money. They got some guys to help out that offensive line. But you're going to have defenses clog the box. Yeah. Besides Odell Beckham, who do they have on the outside that really threatens any type of passing game?
Oh, exactly, and I think that's...
Sorry, Evan Engram, but he's a tight end.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, you've mentioned a couple times stretching the field. I mean, Odell has that ability. I think the thing with him is that he has the big play ability, and he has elite speed. I remember...
he's won them games.
Yeah, I remember there was a couple years ago, that whole thing with the field goal net. The touchdown that he scored was just a slant route, and once he got 10 yards, 15 yards downfield and just kicked it in the second gear, I mean, nobody's going to catch him. So I think, to your point, yeah, I mean, that's not a dime a dozen thing. I mean, I think he's a top 10 receiver easily. I mean, we can debate semantics about where you'd place him, whatever. But, I mean, yeah, he's not a guy you just find every year in a draft or whatever. He has ability. It's just a question of, as a team, he's had some issues on the field. He's had that tape that came out off the field. I don't think one of those things by themselves is an issue, but a culmination of that, between that and the boat thing and just kind of disappearing at times on the field, is it all worth it for his ceiling? I think that's what the Giants have to ask themselves. You obviously think yes, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you. I'm just trying to kind of gauge where they're at, because the Giants are at a place, kind of what you're saying, that they're rebuilding, but this draft is...
I wouldn't say rebuild. I'd say retool.
All right, fair enough. But they're in a position with the second, third pick, whatever they have in the draft, where they have a big decision to make. And this is a decision that could really alter the trajectory of the franchise if they get someone like Barkley, if they shore up the defensive front some more and add to their strength some more. It's just, there's a lot of ways they can go.
Since you're bringing up the draft, this is one of my more favorite times of year. I do like the whole draft process, and the thing that surprised me with New York right now is they traded JPP.
Yeah.
Now with that, a lot of people say at that number 2 spot you draft the quarterback, because that mind frame is you might not ever get back to that second overall pick.
That's true.
Maybe 10, 15 years down the road, because as a franchise you don't want to pick top 5. That means you were god awful the year before.
And plus, the Giants, to your point, are traditionally a franchise. When they struggle, they're like 8-8. They're typically a very well run, solid franchise, in the same vein as the Steelers and the Packers and such.
So when you're picking that high, the paper, which is the draft formula paper, like the top 5 impactful positions per for a team, it's quarterback, wide receiver, corners, pass rushers, and I'm missing one more. Oh, left tackle. Mm-hmm. The most impactful in the game. When you pick that high, you want a guy that's going to last 10 years. You need them to be franchise generational player.
They're going to be a cornerstone.
Yes. So that paper says draft quarterback.
Yep.
But they're looking at this right now as if we draft Barkley, we have an opportunity to win now.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also we just traded JPP and we play some of the best offensive lines in football in our division, and we're going to grab Chubb.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's like a three-way pull right now where do they draft their future quarterback now because they have one of the best hands available right now with they can get whatever quarterback that Cleveland doesn't get? Do they go and try and win now with Barkley? Or do they add another pass rusher because they're playing in their division, which has solid offensive lines throughout Washington, Dallas, and Philadelphia?
Yeah, and it's just, again, it's that whole idea. This is a big moment for them, and it can really affect their future in not even just this year, but the next 10 years. So I'm glad you broke that down a little bit because it's a great way of looking at it that they're hopefully not going to be back in this spot because they don't want to be, second worst team in the league. But they have holes to fill, but they also have holes to fill, not necessarily now, but 5 years from now, and like the quarterback thing. So they have a decision to make. So I think it's very, especially with the lead up to the draft and everything that happens with that, it's very interesting to see where they go because I feel like most years you start getting an idea of what people are thinking. Some years, like, people just predict the first 5 picks just because it's like so obvious what's going to happen. And this year just feels like it's a lot more unknown what people are thinking because there's so much top talent at vital positions.
It'll be interesting because once Cleveland goes on the clock, that's when everything gets real because what's Cleveland going to do with that number one? Are they going to get Barkley? If they get Barkley, which I honestly think they should, if they draft Barkley, they're telling me and they're telling the rest of the league that they're trying to win now with Tyrod, Juice, Flash, just a solid offensive line. After that, it's what's New York going to do with what Cleveland just selected. If Cleveland selects Barkley, well, does that mean New York drafts Chubb or the best quarterback now because they have all quarterbacks at their disposal, or do they just solidify that offensive line and grab Quentin Nelson, guard from Notre Dame, and shore up that offensive line for the next 5-8 years?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, the draft is through 3 weeks from tomorrow, so there's still a lot of time and things get more clearer then, but again,
and Buffalo. I'm sorry, and Buffalo's trying to trade up for that 2 pick.
Yeah.
So who knows if New York is like, you know what, we're gonna take it and grab almost like a Cleveland style war chest of picks.
Get a ransom.
Because who knows how much it'll be to move up to the number 2 overall pick.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I would expect they'd get probably Buffalo's 2 first this year, and probably maybe a first next year or a second next year. I mean,
Buffalo has 2.
Yeah, they have the 12th pick and I think the 21st because they had the 21st and 22nd because they had the Chiefs pick from last year from the Mahomes trade.
Yep.
And then they traded their left tackle to Cincinnati and they swapped first round picks. So now they're at 12 instead of 21, I think.
Speaking of Buffalo, besides the number 2 pick with the Giants, I know from Ian Rappaport that they were talking with Denver as well. But I don't think they want the number 5 because by then they might get the shit end of the stick regarding the quarterbacks.
Right. And I don't know if Denver would want to move because they're also in a position where they got Case Keenum. They have a stopgap where they could be competitive now, but Case Keenum isn't your long-term solution.
Yeah, they're going to be interesting because you could go, well, they have Paxton, so that's their project quarterback. But what's another quarterback in that quarterback room? But that's just a ton of resources into that position where maybe grab. See, I need to dive into Denver because I don't.
I know they've had issues with their offensive line, so that could be another. They could go after Nelson if he's there at 4.
Yeah, they did just spend big money on Ronald Leary last year, so that would give them 2 all-pro guards. Well, saying that Quentin Nelson will be an all-pro, just saying.
Right.
Or linebacker, they could use a good coverage linebacker as well.
That's what's interesting. I really next time we come in, we're diving into this. Like we're gonna really get big into it, but I'm glad we brought up some of the draft stuff because I haven't even really thought that far into it.
Oh, I've been thinking draft since the scouting combine.
Hey, you're ahead, you're further ahead than me. I mean, I was so focused on free agency, I haven't really started getting deep into it. Like I've seen the surface stories, but I haven't really immersed myself in it. But I do want to circle back to the Rams. We talked about them with Cooks, but they just signed Ndamukong Suh.
Yes,
And
yes, they did.
And I think what they're doing there is interesting because I think there's a lot of excitement in that building just from the fact that they had their most successful season in like 10 years last season. Won the division, made the playoffs. They got bounced by Atlanta, but they're trending upwards. And what's fascinating is they've been so aggressive this offseason because they have a lot of money to spend. And before we went on the air, you said, how are they going to pay all these guys? You can't pay everybody long term. And it got me thinking, and it's just the fact that they think they can win now. They have a lot of talent on that team. And you have to understand that Todd Gurley's still on his rookie deal. Jared Goff's on his rookie deal. Those guys are going to have to get paid. Like 100% you have to keep those guys. That's your core that you've been building around. But they're thinking that they're good enough now with all their pieces and adding Sue, adding Peters, adding Talib, that they can make a run in the conference and try to win a title now.
Yeah, they're in a very unique situation where they're grabbing everyone they can because if I were to illustrate a picture, like a pie chart, normally a quarterback's salary takes up about a quarter of that. Right now, it's just a little sliver. So they're able to divert these funds and get big talent per position.
Yeah, and they're just not paying a lot of people. Like, they have to pay Aaron Donald after this year. And I think another interesting thing I've heard brought up about the Sue thing is that it kind of sets the market for Donald for next year because now he's going to say, I want, Sue got 14. He's going to say, I want 16, 17. But they've set their own market, which I think is fascinating, just the way they kind of did that. You've got probably a top 3 defense interior lineman in Sue. I'd argue that Donald's probably number 1 right now. So you've got them on the same team, and now you can kind of use that as a starting point, which I think is fascinating.
Almost like Cooks, I see them renting Sue for this year. I don't think Sue will be back in 2019.
No, definitely not.
Because of that. Because you're going to have to pay Aaron Donald. So my point is that just like that pie chart illustration, as long as you weren't in cap hell like Dallas is, which is not able to do that.
Right.
Last year, Philadelphia, they managed their cap well, and they were able to go out and spend money on Smith, Alshon Jeffries, defensive talent, Nigel Bradham.
Yeah, they got Chris Long. They got a lot of people.
If you manage your cap correctly and you strike gold with these quarterbacks on their rookie deal, you can do these super team-esque like LA is doing right now.
And that's something, not to cut you off, but that's a lot of the talk and a lot of articles I've read is people saying that this is the new way to like get rich overnight, basically. I mean, because of the rookie salary system, you're paying quarterbacks such a minuscule amount. I mean, what's Dallas paying Dak Prescott? Less than $1 million a year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absurd. Like, him and Elliott combined are probably, like 6-7 mil tops? Probably not even that.
Yeah, I think Zeke is 5.5, 6, and then Dak is like 850.
Yeah. And I think the first time this happened was Russell Wilson, because Russell Wilson was in the Prescott position. And Seattle was able to do that. And people took notice to that. And they've kind of expounded upon that, and they've said, well, people aren't making the money they are on the front end, even in the first round. You can win now if you hit on a Carson Wentz, if you hit on, we still don't necessarily know what the ceiling for Jared Goff is, but he has potential to be on that level, I think.
And so, he has weapons now.
Yeah, exactly, but you're not paying him so you can invest in those weapons. And that's what I think makes the whole thing with the Rams fascinating, because they've seen Philly do it. They understand that they have a position where, sure, in 5-6 years, they can still be competitive if they have Gurley and Goff. They could still be a contender. But why can't they be a contender now if they can get the talent and fill their holes and strengthen their strengths like they did with the Ndamukong Suh. I think it's just fascinating, the team building approach.
You do have to plan long term though, because this is where Seattle dropped the ball.
Oh,
Was
definitely.
after they signed or re-signed everybody on LOB and that whole defense. Then they traded their best lineman for Jimmy Graham in an attempt to win now again. You can look at Seattle this year, and we had a crazy stat line in week, I don't know, 9 or 10. It was the percentile of touchdowns that they got was all through Russell Wilson.
Yeah, it was like all but like 3 or 4. It was absurd.
And you see what's happening to them right now is they're getting rid of all these defensive talents that they signed long term.
Yeah.
So they didn't really manage that well for long term. But I know what you're saying with LA saw that, knows their division is open, because think in the NFC West, who stands out? Walking in from last year's talent was LA. I mean, and then you got...
I think San Fran's, honestly, they're probably, them and Seattle are probably 2.
But here's the difference, though. I would say San Francisco's on the upswing, where you have Arizona and Seattle on the downswing.
Definitely. And to your point, like number 2, there's a significant drop-off from the Rams. Like that's obvious regardless who you put at number 2. Because the Rams have just solidified. They were the best team in their division. Now they're even better.
On paper right now. On paper.
Sure, definitely. But yeah, it's very interesting to see how everything's playing out, and just kind of everybody saw what Philly did and what Jacksonville's done, and they're trying to emulate it.
I will say, bringing up Philly, I will say, even though on paper they have all these great names and everything looks flashy because last year they won the division, they're in the playoffs, I'm not saying it's going to happen, just it's a good thing to look at is last time the NFL got so amped up about a team like this was when Philadelphia proclaimed themselves the superstar squad or
super
something.
Team.
Yeah, the super team. So you just got to be careful, even though you have all these big names. Not saying it's gonna happen. I don't. There's no ill will towards LA or anything, but I'm just saying, just because all these big moves are happening and big names at each position, doesn't mean it's gonna be successful.
No, definitely, and that's why we played a game. And I think there's, to kind of round it off, there's a great Bill Belichick quote from way back when where he said, "It's not about collecting talent; it's about assembling a team." So yeah, I mean, they got a lot of talent, but can they craft that into something that the parts create something even better as a whole? Which I think is going forward, we're gonna find out.
Thinking about that team, I think Michael Vick was the quarterback for that Eagles team. I remember that offseason because Dallas tried to sign a corner.
Oh, it was Asamagwa from the Raiders, maybe. Remember Namde? Remember he was
Yes.
He was like he was the big shit back in like 2008.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a wild time to be alive.
Yeah.
I remember that he was like the sole good player on that Raiders defense.
Yes. And then we're a super team and they crap the bed.
Hey, if you want to talk about crap in the bed, somebody who's trying to uncrap the bed is Johnny Football.
Yes, Johnny Football. He threw for 2 college pro days, and he had some individual meetings with certain teams, and most notably was New England.
Yeah. I think the thing with him is that when he came out of school, I hated the guy because he was just cocky. He was just no filter. He was, you know what he was? He was your typical college douchebag. Like, you know what I mean? He was a frat boy. Like, you know, you just didn't like him because of his persona. Looking back at it and seeing how he's kind of turned a corner, I mean, the guy had issues, and that's no excuse. I mean, like, he beat up his girlfriend, and I mean, that's inexcusable regardless of what you're going through. But, I mean, if you look at the drug and substance issues he had, I mean, he's actively tried to correct himself. And I think you can at least acknowledge that and say, you know what? I mean, hopefully he's in a better place in his life and he's able to play football again. I mean, more power to him. So I think the whole story, my opinion on him's changed just because I think he's kind of had a so-called come to Jesus moment where he's kind of tried to sort his life out a little bit.
Yeah, he's trying to straighten his path. Coming out of college, I wanted him personally because he was a winner and he was electrifying on the field.
Yeah.
But the thing is when he was in college, he ran a spread offense, screens, throwing down, check down to your running back, slants. It wasn't a play progression style or a NFL ready offense.
Yeah.
It was mostly him going 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna run.
Exactly.
And he was probably one of the best impromptu quarterbacks in the collegiate level. And coming out, I really thought he was going to be successful. And then just the demise of him when he was drafted by Cleveland, and it just...
Well, it just wasn't a good environment for him to be into.
No.
I mean, we've talked about it several times that Cleveland just doesn't have a good culture to begin with. And he tweeted something today. I mean, he shit-talked the Browns a little bit, but he also was like, from an X's and O's perspective, you should have known not to take me. I think he's kind of reflected upon that and understood he wasn't ready for that moment to go into the NFL, like just mentally, and probably like you're saying from an X's and O's standpoint, he probably didn't understand the game like some guys do who play in more complicated offenses at the college level.
Even because Gruden does the Gruden camp, the quarterback camp, even when he was at that, people knew he was going to be a project. I mean, he already came in undersized. He's not your prototypical sized quarterback, so he was already going to be down a notch. And then just his style offense, that's another notch, and his mechanics you have to refine.
Right.
So for him going to Cleveland was very, like, they're going to ask him to play after a few weeks.
Yeah,
and that's not what he needed.
They threw him in there. I remember they were actually like in the running for the division. It was like week 12, 13 that year. And they started losing some games, and everybody just started throwing Brian Hoyer over the side, and we're like, we want Manziel. And what you're saying, like, he wasn't ready for that. He needed to sit a year. And I think he needed to sit a year with a team that knew what they were doing. I mean, we've talked about Cleveland just, they overthrow their regimes every 2 or 3 years and start over. It's not a conducive environment to learn and develop in, especially at quarterback.
Yeah, he mentioned it in his tweet from today or whatever it was. I think it was on the Rich Eisen or Dan Patrick show.
Yep.
He was just saying how he needed that guidance, and he wasn't able to get that in Cleveland, and they didn't give it to him. It just wasn't available. Now, if he had gone to a team like a Kansas City Chiefs and Andy Reid, a quarterback guru, who they had an established starter so he could sit back and learn the NFL culture.
I'd even say Dallas.
Yes, yeah, even Dallas, because at that point we had Tony Romo and Jason Garrett, who is an ex-NFL quarterback as well. If he was in a stable environment with resources that could help him become a better quarterback at the NFL level, we might not have this conversation right now, because he, on his tweet, had said that his lack of production was very demoralizing to him, and it helped him alleviate that with the substances and whatnot, because it was the first time since high school where he just wasn't the guy. He wasn't, quote-unquote, filling the stat sheets.
Well, you have to think of the ego that was built. I mean, he won a Heisman in college. He was the big man on campus. He beat Alabama a couple times. I mean, he was basically worshipped by the media, by the A&M fan base, everything. So you have to understand kind of where you come from, where your people worship the ground you walk on, to you are second string on one of the worst teams in the league. I mean, just think about that. I mean, that's just, it's a culture shock. And when somebody has issues like the way he had issues, both just with his ego, with the substances and whatever, I mean, that's not a good place to go, particularly if it's not a successful environment and a winning environment. I mean, as a player, and again, he's talking about the guidance and whatever. I mean, Cleveland's never been, especially in the last 10, 15 years, a place to go if you're looking to grow as a player. It's a very volatile environment.
Yeah, I honestly believe if he went to a team with a proven veteran, even like the Chargers.
Yeah.
With learning behind Phillip.
Yep.
He just didn't have that big brother, so to speak, to have and guide him through the whole process as a whole right off the rip.
No, definitely.
He was asked to be a savior, which he needed saving himself.
Yeah, exactly. My whole thing with him is that I think there's talent there. Is it talent that will end up being? Will he be able to be an NFL quarterback with that talent and ability? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Like you said, he didn't play in a pro-style offense. He's been away from the game a little bit. I think he has the physical ability to be good, but I think there's a lot of things with reading defenses, making good decisions that we just don't know. But I'd be interested to see if he got another opportunity, how it played out.
Yeah, and he has to keep his nose clean off the field.
Yeah. I mean, the bottom line is that, and it's good that the NFL is taking a stance about domestic violence, but I mean, he has it on his record. And I think if he doesn't end up signing with a team, I mean, that's probably going to be a big contributing factor, is that you don't do stuff like that, something horrible of that nature, and get a second chance if you're a question mark. Teams automatically just kind of sort you out. But if you're somebody who has elite skill, Michael Vick being one who went to prison for the dogfighting, everybody knew he was good. That's why he got a second chance. Johnny Manziel, nobody knows if he's good, so I don't know if teams want to take that baggage with them and sign a guy like that. And I mean, you know, he has to live with that one way or another, but it'll be interesting to see if anybody just brings him into camp and just takes a chance to see what he has.
I will say, with RG3 signing today to Baltimore,
Yeah.
I do feel that Johnny Manziel will be on a roster for the preseason.
Yeah, I can see it.
Maybe nothing imminent right now, but come after OTAs or maybe even week 2 of the preseason in case someone gets hurt.
Yep.
I think it's gonna take someone to get hurt on a roster for someone to go, we're gonna take you in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair assessment all around, but I'm very interested to see how that all unfolds in regards to him. The last thing I want to touch on before we wrap up is some of the rule changes that came out last week in the league. And I know you feel, I don't know, vindicated about the catch rule, but I mean, you're just kind of pointing to common sense at this point. You know, everything you knew to be a catch is a catch now. I know that's a sore subject with Dallas fans.
Yeah, I mean, we got robbed, but it is what it is. I'm just glad that they can now clarify the rule and make it more simplistic for even the casual fan to know what a catch and what not a catch is.
I think the only thing I don't like about this, because they did clean it up a little bit, but they said in their verbiage that you need to have 2 feet control and a football move, and which could involve a potential third step reaching for more yardage, Des Bryant reaching for more yardage, Jesse James, or the ability to make such a move. And I say, what the fuck does that mean, the ability? Like, I feel like you're jumping in
body control. If you can control your body, you maintain possession of the ball.
All right. I mean, I just feel like that maybe it won't be that big of a deal. Maybe they'll have it locked down. I just feel like that verbiage at the end, or the ability to do so, I just feel like that word ability, it's not necessarily hypothetical, but it says, well, you could have, but this guy trucked you and you dropped the ball. Like, maybe I'm just reading into it too much. I feel like that part's a little vague.
Yeah, I'm trying to picture some in-game moments that I could, but I honestly think it's along the lines of that Des Bryant stretch.
Yep.
Jesse James, Calvin.
Right. I just think it's a step in the right direction, but I think they need to sit in the preseason, and I think they need to nail down what's going to be good and what's going to be a no catch. You know what I mean? Like, use the preseason as your trial period. The kind of, like, if you have borderline calls, make a decision on them. You can make a decision after the fact and be like, well, that was wrong. We're going to enforce it this way now, because the games don't count. You know, seasons aren't impacted. Jobs aren't impacted. It's fine.
Yeah, coming from Ian Rappaport, he says that at the competition committee, they showed the catches from Dez and Jesse James and Calvin Johnson, and they did things a little differently. And when they showed these clips to the committee, the question they asked was, explain how this is not a catch. That was their
Yeah.
as in, like, right now it's a catch. Explain how this is not a catch.
Yeah.
And apparently they all came that, like, every one of those was really a catch.
Right.
Which helped them with the wordage. And I think that's what that last part is getting a little caught up, is these players are showing the ability to try and stretch every single yard out. So if you can stretch out for half a yard, then you're controlling the ball.
Yeah, you have the ability to do so, so therefore you have control. All right, I feel better about it, because I just feel like if you're gonna clean this up, I think it needs to be clean, because it's such a stupid. Like, we all know what a catch is, but the rule doesn't know what the catch is. You know what I mean? That's been a problem for the last 5 or 6 years. Whenever Calvin Johnson happened, which is a while ago.
It doesn't clarify the bang plays, though.
Right.
That's just gonna come natural, because this is a violent game. So those plays where the receiver runs across the middle, he grabs it for one stride and then gets cracked by a linebacker or a safety. It's not really gonna clarify that. That's still gonna be a gray area where it was a catch, boom boom, smack, fumble, recovery for the defense, or incomplete pass, which you can't review anyways. It's not going to clarify that. That's not what this is clarifying. This is the catches that were game-altering down sideline or in the middle of the field, where
the things that were obviously, to anybody who has any understanding of a catch, were a catch, but the rule said they weren't.
Yeah.
Which is fair, which needed to be done. So, I mean, I just hope that, it all rolls out smoothly and whatnot. Something that I think isn't going to go as smoothly, and I'm kind of having an issue with, is the new below to the head rule they have, which they said that anybody who uses the crown of the helmet is a 15-yard penalty and potential grounds for ejection.
Yeah, that goes for offense and defense. Now, the thing with offense is a lot of times you'll see it with the running backs.
Yep.
The running backs, when they hit the hole, they try and put their shoulder/head into the linebacker or safety's chest and run over him. This goes back to the bang plays. You're still gonna get those headshots, because football is just like that, reactionary, and you're gonna come in hot. And unfortunately, no matter how many times they try and eliminate these helmet-to-helmet contact, it all begins at the Pop Warner level. If they're teaching if you're teaching your child or teenager correctly how to tackle, then it's going to go with them to college and it'll bring it up to them with the NFL. The NFL, right now, with this, is just a Band-Aid.
The problem the NFL has is that they're doing damage control for the fact that they ignored all this concussion research for so long. People were saying there is an issue here with blows to the head, and they're like, nope, there's not a problem. And there's no... People are cynical about the fact that the league cares. They're just like, the league doesn't give a shit. They just want to make their money. They don't care what happens to the players. And it's a justifiable stance to have. But the problem is the league is trying to look like they care, and they're making rules that I think are just counterintuitive to how the game is played.
I give them credit for trying.
Yeah.
But I bring it to mechanics. You have to learn at a young age, and it's just muscle memory. I mean, you can't expect to change a professional athlete in the way that they tackle or the way that they attack a defender when they're running with the ball. What's that saying? You can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Right.
That's how I view this. It's just a Band-Aid. We have to start at the most earliest stage, which is when Pee Wee football.
Yeah.
You gotta teach. You gotta have competent coaches coaching these kids the right way to wrap up, tackle through them, and keep your head up. Ryan Shazier, when he made that tackle and broke his neck or whatever,
He had his head down.
Yeah, he had his head down, exactly. And that's, anybody who's played football will tell you to never do that.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah.
You can't teach these older players any differently. It's a violent game. You got to teach them how to do it properly at the early stages, and then keep it with them as they go through your high school, college, and then all the way up to professional level.
No, and I agree. I think it comes from fundamentals and just trying to weed that improper technique out of the game. But I think the other thing is that I really feel bad for defensive players because, like, when Barry Church made that hit on Gronk in the AFC Championship, he hit him in the head, but you could tell from the slow-mo replay he wasn't trying to. The problem is that you're trying to react to a moving target, hit the moving target, while that target is, like, not only moving horizontally, like, down the field, but their body's moving. They're reacting to you reacting. It's really unfair to put this burden on defensive players in a matter of 4 or 5 seconds to basically stop time and position themselves to it's not possible. The rules are being made by people. I mean, I know there are people in the league office who have played, but a lot of these owners and, like, the commissioner have never been on the field and tried to actually make these plays that they're asking people to make without these consequences. It's just going to happen, though. You're going to hit people in the head, even if you're trying with all your might not to. It's just going to happen.
Yeah, with this, you're going to get a lot more plays like the Minnesota Miracle.
Yeah.
Where the safety or corner comes down, and they're not going to attack the ball at its highest point, but they're going to try and make the tackle at the waist and stuff because they don't want to cost their team a 15-yard penalty
and they don't want to get
automatic first down.
And they don't want to get kicked out of the game.
Yeah, well, that is depending on the severity. If it was intentional, and
I think ejection should only be used like Vontez Burfict, like when Smith-Schuster crackbacked him. It's stuff like that where there is, like, blatant intent to, like, use your head like that.
I would point to when Josh Norman was on Carolina and OBJ with that whole fiasco.
Yeah.
That would require a 1 penalty automatic ejection.
Yeah.
After that, it gets.
That
was the last time for me because even with Juju Smith-Schuster, it was a play. He was blocking.
I just think, like, the problem is with these rules is you can't legislate intent. And you really can't legislate it even by looking at a replay intent. You don't know what's going through someone's head. You know what you're saying? F this guy.
That's why I bring up OBJ and Norman.
Because that's obvious.
Because it was outside of the play area, and they're over cracking each other, headshots, and all that other dirty play stuff. I mean, inside a play and head-to-head and, like, Juju blocking, that's a hard play. That's a hard play.
I honestly think that it's also, like, I think, just to kind of go on a small tangent, I think the fact that crackback blocks are illegal is kind of unfair because when you play football, you're told to keep your freaking head on a swivel. Like, it's just, like, that's part of the game. You're going to get cracked sometimes, especially if you're, like, on a punt return. I know that play wasn't, but, like, if the guy's just coming across the field, you got to keep your head up because you might get cracked. Like, that's just what happens.
They're trying to prevent injury. It happened with Golden Tate and Sean Lee. Golden Tate came on a crack block and knocked Sean Lee out and had a concussion.
Yeah.
So that's another concussion thing that goes hand in hand. They're just trying to prevent that.
Yeah. And like, I get it to a degree, but I think you have to look at the big picture and you have to say how much your rule change is going to impact the fabric of the game. And I think that's still up in the air. I'm not saying these rules are going to ruin the game, but I mean, I think you have to think about the game is violent, the game is physical. You have to understand what it is at its core. It's just, it's, you know, it's, I don't want to say it's a blood sport, but I mean, it's, you know, I mean, its focus is around physical contact, and that's, you're just going to get plays like that to a degree. So I'm very cautious in seeing how it all ends up at the end of the day, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of these rule changes come with opposition, but as a whole, the product hasn't changed. It's still an offensive game. Everyone wants to see points scored, but at the end of the day, defense still wins championships.
You know what? The last rule I want to touch on, and one that I wholeheartedly support, is, and it wasn't really talked about a lot because of these other two that we just talked about, is that the league office can now look at a replay and can eject the player for something they weren't necessarily ejected with. And the example I used was Gronk. When Gronk jumped on Tre'Davious White's neck, 100% should have got thrown out of the game right there and then, and he did not. And the league looked at that and said, and I think probably secondarily was the Odell Beckham, Josh Norman stuff, where the league can phone in and say, you need to get this guy off the field. Like, that's what they did is just inexcusable. So I like that just because, I'm no defender at all of what Gronk did. I mean, it was dirty. It was dangerous. He could have broken the guy's neck. And he should have gotten chucked then. He should have missed the next game. But, yeah, I thought that was a good step.
Yeah, to get a phone call from the league, though, it has to be pretty drastic because then you're just undermining the officials on the field.
True.
It has to be something blatant like Gronk.
Yeah.
That's other than that, I mean, you put these officials on the field to get a feel for the game because some games are going to be more chippy than others,
right?
And officials will let it play out. So that's the only thing I'm a little weary of is now every time someone gets into a scuffle, do I have to worry about the league calling and saying to get these guys off the field because they got into a little scuffle? I mean, you got 53 alpha males on each team. It's gonna happen.
Yeah,
you're gonna have a scuffle. So that's the only thing. It has to be something clean cut, drastic, like Gronk landing on his neck, doing the people's elbow or whatever he's doing. It has to be something of that nature, because if not, it's a little you're overstepping your bounds a little bit.
No, I agree with you. It's actually, again, glad you brought that up because that's not even an angle I considered. But yeah, I mean, there's a difference in my mind between pushing and shoving and what Gronk did. I think another example is like when Seattle and Jacksonville played this year, Michael Bennett was like diving at people's knees, like during the kneel downs. Guy should have gotten suspended for the next game, honestly. There's no need for that.
But he's still playing.
Yeah, but you're diving at people's knees?
Tampa Bay did it. When Greg Schiano was there, it was their head coach. He brought that from their college into the NFL. Even when the offense has the ball and they're kneeling, they came off the snap hard, like they're playing third and 14, trying to sack the quarterback.
Yeah, but like there's a difference between like engaging the guy and then there's like trying to like blow someone's knee out like on the offensive line. What Bennett was doing was just diving at the dude's knees.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like
I do, but then that's also in mid play. That's where I feel the league is overstepping. But
I just like there's intent there though. Like I don't feel like Michael Bennett's trying to break up the play. I think he's trying to injure the dude across from him. It's tough. I'm not saying it's clear cut and easy to distinguish, but I mean, I think when you're at the point where it's not a football play and you're intentionally trying to injure someone.
That is a football play, though.
But diving at someone's knees, though?
Yeah.
I just don't think...
You stop the guard from going to the second level.
I don't know. I mean...
You can't judge someone's intent mid-play. All right, so here's another thing.
But you got to understand the context is that Jacksonville's up by 2 scores and they're... I don't know.
He's playing hard. He's making a play.
I know. I just said I would disagree with you that it's tough.
Here's an example that I wouldn't mind the NFL going get these two out. I'm going back a few years. Andre Johnson on Houston and Cortland Finnegan on Tennessee.
Oh yeah, they started
when they started fighting, tearing helmets off, and just
didn't they get kicked out? I thought they got kicked out for that.
All right, well, let's say they play that out. Let's say they just call unsportsmanlike conduct on both teams, offset and blah, 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 and they still play. That I wouldn't mind if the NFL was like, you guys are allowing that? No. They just fought MMA style. Get them out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best example, is the Beckham-Norman thing. I mean, they were just...
Yes.
That went on forever, man. Like, it wasn't just, like, 2 plays. It was, like, they kept doing it from, like, the whistle to, like, the 4th quarter. They were just whacking at each other, and it was ridiculous. So, I mean, I think that rule, hopefully, to your point, should be only used in the extremest of cases, like
yes.
Break glass in the case of emergency. So to speak.
It has to be a nuclear option. Like that's the only thing. Because then, what's the need for the officials? They gotta get a feel for the game. They gotta, you gave them that job to officiate the game, so let them do it.
No, it's
obviously
true.
They're gonna miss calls, and in some cases, like their Gronk's case, they might say, "Oh, well, that holds not enough merit."
I think it also, to kind of like to your point, is that there's 5 or 6 officials on the field who have to keep track of 22 people on 120 yards of field, like, by 50 something yards. There's so much ground to cover that they're gonna miss things, and that goes from holding penalties, illegal contacts, to maybe I don't know this for a fact, but maybe they didn't see Gronk dive on the guy. Maybe they just saw him on the ground. You know what I'm saying? Like,
no, the millions of other people watching.
But that's
in
what
the
it is.
stands and in the television. Sorry.
But that's what I mean. The refs don't have like they can't rewind back time like the TV can and be like, look what this douchebag did. He dove on someone's neck.
You're right. They can't look at it with the intent live action like we can, because networks will replay it.
Exactly.
Time again.
Yeah, it makes the officials look bad, and I mean, officials, I think we all kind of just think that officials suck, and I think there's a lot of times where that opinion is warranted, but I think at the same time is that they're human, they're going to screw up.
Players get fined for talking smack about the officials.
Yeah.
So it's very, you have to use that option carefully, because if not, you're taking some of the authority away from the officials.
Yeah, you're making them basically just like, I don't know, just kind of like the shell of what they're supposed to be. They're just they're kind of like puppets.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I like your take on it. It's definitely an interesting way to look on it, and I don't know. I'm ready for the draft. I'm ready for football, man. Like, it's April. It's like been cold and rainy out.
OTAs start soon. They just released the OTA schedule.
Did they?
Yeah.
I'll have to look it up, because I'm just like, I follow baseball. I mean, I follow basketball and hockey a little, but it's not football. It's just not. It's not the same thing. It's not an event. I can sit and watch on my phone as the Tigers lose 1-0 and get annoyed, but it's not the same as, devoting 3 hours to my Sunday to watch the Patriots. It's just.
Yeah, I do say football's 365 for me. I eat, sleep, breathe.
Yeah, and I
football.
And I follow it, and obviously, do my research for this podcast and stuff, but it's like, it's not the same as just like the season. You got the fantasy, you've got the games, you've just got
the
everything.
build up.
Yeah, and there's always so much to digest between each week, and it's just, there's stuff to digest now as we've just talked for an hour about stuff going on, but it's just like, I'm looking forward to the draft.
Yeah, the NFL does a good job on spreading everything out. Every month it's something. This month is the draft. Right. Next month is the OTAs. And then you got mini camp. Then you got training camp.
Right.
And then you got preseason. And then, behold, we're in September, and here's kickoff weekend.
It's true. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to next time we sit down. Really, I have to hit the books and really start looking at the draft. Just kind of looking at, there's so much that could happen in the top 5-10 picks that can just impact everything, and you always get the crazy trades up and stuff, and just, I don't know, just trying to look at it and give our 2 cents. And I'm gonna definitely look at it like a March Madness. I'm gonna predict a couple crazy trades, because it's so unpredictable. You don't know how it's gonna go down.
Yeah, teams are a lot more willing to trade when the clock is going.
Yeah, and everything's in the moment.
Yep.
So,
because no one wants to sit on extra picks all the way to 2019 draft. When they trade picks, they want them now.
Exactly. So I'm looking forward to it. It's all I got. Unless you got anything you'd like to add before we wrap up?
I'm ready for the draft, which is in Dallas. So
yeah, that's true.
I am ready. AT&T Stadium.
Yeah, they better fill that thing to the brim.
Yeah, I am curious to see how many fans are in attendance. I saw a little bit of sketch work on how they're setting it up, so it ought to be interesting.
No, definitely. So, yeah, I'm glad we sat down and talked about some things going on, and